Brandon, welcome to You Politics. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So first off, tell us a little bit about how the Trump administration in the first term, what sort of policies that they were pursuing with regard to the LGBT community, and how it's, if they get into office again, how that would be different in a second term.
Yeah, this is one advantage we have as voters in this election cycle is we don't have to guess what kind of president Donald Trump would be, especially for the LGBTQ plus community, because he's been president before. And the best way to know how Donald Trump will act should he get another shot at the White House is to look at how he treated the community before. Donald Trump led the most anti-LGBTQ plus administration in American history, and he did it in a number of ways. First and foremost, he banned transgender folks who made the sacrifice to serve in the military. He banned them from serving their country honorably. He also argued in court that businesses should be able to refuse to serve LGBTQ plus people, that they should be able to put up signs that say, "We don't serve your kind here." He spent the 4 years that he was in office relentlessly targeting LGBTQ plus people, using our community as a punching bag. And it's clear that he would go even further should he get another chance to lead this country. He put out really early on in the race when Ron DeSantis was still running, he put out a bizarre 3.5 minute long video where he described how he would wield the power of government against healthcare providers who dared to provide best practice medically necessary care to transgender young people. He talked about defunding hospitals and, potentially holding doctors criminally liable for providing that care. And then if you look at his Project 2025 agenda, it's riddled with anti-LGBTQ plus plans to seize control of how people live their lives across the country. It wants to use the government as a tool of propaganda to promote heterosexuality as the quote ideal lifestyle. And then it wants to target benefits for same-sex couples, for LGBTQ plus people, including adoption rights and other things like that. So through and through, Donald Trump has demonstrated that he does not care for the LGBTQ plus community, that he would be willing to set our rights ablaze if it serves him politically. And he demonstrated that in the 4 years that he was in the White House.
What is your view on JD Vance? I mean, he's been pretty outspoken on LGBTQ issues. Speak a little bit about him because, if Trump does get back to the White House, there's a good chance that Vance could succeed him.
I got to say that the obsession, the MAGA obsession with how other people live their lives, how we identify, who we love, whether or not we have children, it's bizarre. It's a little bit creepy. I think JD Vance thinks more about whether or not I'm going to have biological children than I've ever thought about it in my life. And that is disturbing, but it also speaks to this broader agenda of control that, you hear it from JD Vance in his commentary, you see in the way Donald Trump approached the presidency the first time. The MAGA collective believe that there's only one right way to be a human being, that, in terms of gender identity, you're either a man and you like blue and drive trucks, or you're a woman and you wear dresses and like pink. And those are the only options for you. And if you live anywhere outside those lines that they've created for you, that box they're trying to put you in, that they will use the power of government as a weapon against you to force you to comply, to force you back into that box, or out of public life altogether. So when you hear JD Vance talking about LGBTQ plus people, disparaging the community, when you hear JD Vance disparaging people who don't have children, families who don't look like his, or people who don't live like him, it is about a broader theme that exists in the MAGA movement, that there is only one right way to be a person. There's only one right way to be an American. There's only one right way to be a human being. And if you do not comply, if you do not bend to the will of the MAGA movement, they will use the levers of power to punish you for it.
Mhm. So what races below the presidential level are you looking at that will be significant for the LGBTQ community?
I think it's really important for us to name that who sits behind the desk in the Oval Office is very, very important. But it's also important whether or not we have control of Congress, whether or not we have control of state legislatures, of governors' mansions. So there are a whole host of races. I would tell people you've got to make sure you know up and down the ballot who's on there, who's a pro-equality candidate, and make sure that you are voting for people up and down the ballot, because every single one of those levers of power matters. We have to flip the House of Representatives. We've got to make Hakeem Jeffries the next Speaker of the House. And in many ways, that actually runs through LGBTQ plus candidates. You have people like Mondaire Jones in New York. You have people like Will Rollins in California. You start to win some of these seats with openly LGBTQ plus candidates, and you're well on your way to retaking the House of Representatives and putting a pro-equality majority in place. We also have to hold on to our Senate majority, and we'd love to expand that while we're at it. And that too has huge implications on the LGBTQ plus community. We've seen, MAGA Republicans in the House, for instance, put forward a record number of anti-LGBTQ plus bills, put them on the floor, put riders onto, bills that seemingly have nothing to do with the LGBTQ plus community. They're trying to amend them to attach anti-LGBTQ plus policies. We see the shenanigans that they're doing in the House of Representatives, and the Senate has presented a block to that. The Senate has presented, a pro-equality firewall that has held those things back from getting their way to the president's desk. And we've got to be able to hold on to that, which means we've got to reelect people like Tammy Baldwin and others in order for us to hold on to our majority in the Senate. And finally, as I mentioned, so much of the assault on LGBTQ plus people, really the assault on our freedoms across the country, has come from a state legislative level. And we know that, for a very long time, for decades, the far right aimed their resources at trying to amass power on a state legislative level. And as a result, we've seen some really horrific things come out of places like Florida and Georgia and Tennessee and others. We have to win on a state legislative level. We have to win on a school board level, because our freedoms matter up and down the ticket. Our freedoms matter on every level of government. So we've got openly LGBTQ plus candidates who are running for state legislative seats across the country. We have pro-equality allies who are running in those seats, and it's really important that we win those races too.
Great. And finally, tell us just a little bit about the work that HRC is doing to support these issues and candidates.
We launched our campaign in May for the year, and it's called "We Show Up, Equality Wins." And this, this sort of framing of the election is so important to me because, number one, it acknowledges that MAGA has not attacked the LGBTQ plus community because they think we're weak. They have pulled at our freedoms, torn at our civil liberties, because they are terrified of just how powerful we are as a community. And so our "We Show Up, Equality Wins" campaign really speaks to the power of the community. We have made incredible progress over the last 4+ decades. And it's because we've always shown up for each other. We've always shown up for our freedoms. We've always shown up for our liberation. Even when people told us things were impossible, we still went to bat for each other. We showed up, and when we showed up, equality has won over and over again. As a part of the launch of that "We Show Up" campaign, we committed a $15 million election year investment, a lot of that going to battleground states. They won't surprise you: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, the places we have to win in order to deliver a win for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in November. And that $15 million investment means we're doing all the things necessary in order to win an election. We've identified 75 million equality voters, people who prioritize LGBTQ plus equality when it comes time to decide who to vote for. We've identified 75 million of them across the country. That's the target audience. Those are the people we have to turn out in November. And so we're doing the things we have to do. We're knocking doors, we're making phone calls, we're sending text messages, we're signing up volunteers to work shifts, we're running ads, we're doing everything that we can to mobilize that universe of equality voters to show up to the polls in November. And I would encourage people, if you want to be a part of that work, if you want to do that work with us, go to hrc.org/we-show-up and we'll get you signed up. We'll have you knocking doors, making phone calls, sending text messages, doing the hard work of democracy to make sure we can win.
Brandon, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today, and good luck in the campaign.
Thank you. Appreciate it.